She didn't flinch when Colonel Marsh read the order aloud. She just stood there, hands loose at her sides, eyes forward, and let the words land the way cold air lands. You feel it, but you don't break from it. The order was simple. Effective immediately, Warrant Officer Tess Cavanaugh was to be removed from the Advanced Precision Targeting Program at CFB Suffield. No hearing, no appeal window. The colonel had signed it that morning. The decision, he told the room, had come from above him. Nobody in that briefing room moved. 14 soldiers, all male, some of them men she had outscored on 3 consecutive qualification cycles. They looked at the wall, at their boots, at the middle distance that soldiers look at when they want to be somewhere else entirely. Cavanaugh looked at Marsh. He couldn't hold it. That was the first thing she noticed, and she filed it away the way she filed away everything. Quietly, precisely, in a part of her mind that never got cluttered. She said, "Understood, sir," and walked out. What Marsh didn't know, and what nobody in that room understood yet, was that Tess Cavanaugh had been keeping records since her 3rd week at Suffield. Not because she anticipated this moment. Not because some mentor had whispered advice into her ear about protecting herself in systems designed to push her out. She kept records because she was, at her core, a woman who believed that what happened should be documented. That precision wasn't just a skill for a rifle. It was a discipline of mind. She had grown up in Medicine Hat, the youngest of 3 children, the only daughter of a man who repaired heavy machinery, and a woman who taught high school mathematics in a school where half the students drove 40 minutes each way on gravel roads to get there. Her mother had taught her that numbers didn't lie, that the universe was honest if you asked it the right questions, that a measurement taken carefully was a form of testimony. Tess had grown up asking the right questions. She joined the Canadian Forces at 22 after 2 years of applied mathematics at the University of Calgary, not because she couldn't continue, but because she had sat in a second-year physics lecture one November afternoon and realized she didn't want to understand forces theory. She wanted to understand it in her hands. She was an exceptional shot by the time she finished basic. Not exceptional the way people mean when they want to compliment someone without committing to it. Exceptional the way her range instructor, a weathered sergeant named Hebert, had pulled her aside after her 3rd session and said, with no warmth at all, "Where did you learn to calculate wind that way?" She hadn't learned it anywhere. It was just how she saw the problem. By the time she was posted to Suffield for the APT program, a 12-week advanced training cycle for soldiers selected for long-range precision roles, she had a service record that was, by every measurable standard, stronger than most of the men in her cohort. Her scores weren't close. They were in some categories, records. That was, it turned out, part of the problem. The APT program at Suffield was run by a man named Captain Graham Stitt. Stitt was 38, broad-shouldered, and had spent 11 years building a reputation as the program's most demanding evaluator. He had a way of speaking in the briefing room that made every sentence sound like a verdict. Soldiers who came through his rotations either left sharper or left broken, and he seemed equally satisfied with both outcomes. He had not wanted Cavanaugh in the program. This was not something he said directly, because Stitt was too careful for that. But Tess had learned to read rooms the way she read terrain, not just what was visible, but what the shape of things told you about what lay underneath. The first week, she had been assigned a spotter who was the least experienced in the cohort. Her range time was scheduled after the primary group when light conditions were worse. Twice in the first 10 days, her equipment requests came back with substitutions. Not wrong, exactly, but not what she'd asked for either. Small things. The kind of small things that individually you could explain away, that collectively told a story. She wrote them down. She wrote down dates, times, names where she had them, outcomes. She wrote it the way her mother had taught her to record data, without editorializing, without emotion, with enough precision that someone who hadn't been there could reconstruct exactly what had occurred. She also kept shooting. That was the other thing. Whatever Stitt arranged or didn't arrange, whatever the light conditions or the equipment or the scheduling, she kept shooting. She adapted. When her spotter missed a wind call on a 900-meter shot, she calculated independently and made the adjustment herself before he'd finished speaking. When her range time fell in the flat gray of late afternoon, she learned to read the grass at the target line, to use the subtle lean of it as a live barometer. She didn't talk about it. She didn't perform it for anyone. She just did the work, quietly, and wrote down what she saw, and waited. Week 4. Stitt pulled her from a live evaluation, with no advance notice, and replaced her with a soldier who had scored 17 points below her on the preceding assessment. He gave no explanation in the moment. Later, in the written record, the slot was simply marked as a rotation adjustment. She wrote that down too. What Stitt felt in those early weeks, though he would never have articulated it this way, was the particular discomfort of someone who has arranged the world to confirm what he already believes and finds it failing to confirm. He had told himself, going into the program, that his objection to Cavanaugh's inclusion was professional, that the APT program placed extraordinary physical and psychological demands on its participants, that precision long-range work in operational conditions required a kind of cold-blooded endurance he simply didn't believe she possessed. He had told himself this clearly, even rehearsed versions of it for conversations he anticipated having to have. What he hadn't prepared for was her scores. The scores were not a matter of opinion. They were measurements taken the same way for every participant, recorded the same way, verified the same way. And in the second week, when Cavanaugh posted a group of 5 shots at 1,100 meters in a crosswind that had caused 2 of his top performers to pull their qualifying attempts entirely, Stitt had looked at the target sheet for a long moment and felt something shift behind his sternum that he didn't examine closely. He told himself it was an outlier. In week 3, she did it again. By week 5, 3 of the other soldiers in the cohort had started, quietly and without fanfare, to ask her questions. Corporal Devereaux from Brandon, Manitoba, a compact, serious man who had qualified for the program on his second attempt, had started positioning himself near her at the range during free analysis time. Not obviously, just close enough that he could hear how she talked through her calculations. Stitt noticed this too. He called a cohort meeting that Friday and reminded everyone that APT was an individual assessment program, that collaboration during evaluation windows was not permitted, and that any soldier found coaching others could be reviewed for conduct. He did not name Cavanaugh. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room understood who the remark was directed at. Devereaux looked at the floor. Cavanaugh looked at Stitt. He held it longer this time, maybe 2 seconds. Then he moved on. She wrote it down. The formal order came in week 9. Tess had known something was coming. Not because she was paranoid. She had specifically disciplined herself against paranoia, which is what happens when pattern recognition gets unmoored from evidence. She knew because the evidence was there. The scheduling irregularities had increased. Stitt had twice requested that her performance reports go through a secondary review process that was not standard for other participants. And 3 days before the order, she had been called into an administrative meeting with a lieutenant named Bork, who had asked her, with careful neutrality, whether she had found the program's demands sustainable. She had said yes. She had written down the question and the date in Bork's name. When Marsh read the order, she was not surprised. She was, in the truest sense, prepared. What she had not anticipated, the one variable she hadn't fully modeled, was Devereaux. He came to find her the evening after the order was read. She was in the range annex, technically off limits after hours, but the lock on the side door had been broken for 3 months, and nobody had reported it. Another thing she'd written down, along with the date she'd first noticed it. She was sitting on an equipment bench, not doing anything in particular, just existing in the space where she'd spent the best hours of the past 9 weeks. Devereaux sat down across from her. He had the look of a man rehearsing what he was about to say. "I want to go on record," he said. "With whatever you're planning to do, I want to be on record." She looked at him for a moment. "What makes you think I'm planning to do something because you're still here?" he said. "You didn't pack." He wasn't wrong. She studied him. Devereaux was not a man who did things without thinking about the cost. She had watched him for 9 weeks. He was methodical, careful, the kind of person who read the manual before touching anything. The fact that he was sitting in an off-limits annex, offering to attach his name to a grievance that could complicate his career, was not something he'd done impulsively. You understand what you're saying, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, he said. I do. She told him what she had. Not everything, but enough. The dates, the pattern, the documentation. He listened without interrupting, which she appreciated. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Sergeant Beaumont saw the week 5 substitution. He was standing right there. He won't love being asked, but he knows what he saw. She wrote that down. The formal complaint was filed on a Tuesday. It was 41 pages, including appendices. Every entry was dated. Every claim was supported by a corresponding record. The complaint did not use emotional language. It did not characterize Stitt's motivations. It described in precise and unadorned detail a series of administrative decisions that deviated from documented program standards, with dates, with comparators, with the names of individuals who could be asked to confirm specific observations. It was, in the clearest sense, a measurement. Tess submitted it to the chain of command, copied the Canadian Forces Grievance Authority, and sent a separate notification to the base's Equal Opportunity Advisor, a woman named Major Corrigan, whom she had met once briefly at an administrative briefing and whom she had assessed in that single meeting as someone who read documents carefully. She was not wrong about that either. What followed was not fast, because these things are never fast, and anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or has never been inside a military administrative process. It was measured in weeks, then in months. There were interviews. There were requests for additional documentation which she provided, because she had it. There were conversations in which people asked her, in various registers of politeness, whether she was certain she wanted to continue pursuing this, whether she had considered the effect on her service record, whether there might be another posting that would suit her better. She answered each question the same way. Yes, she was certain. No, she had not considered a different posting. She was pursuing this because the record was accurate, and accurate records matter, and that was the end of it. Devereaux gave a statement. It was 4 pages, handwritten, direct, and without hedging. Beaumont gave a statement too, shorter, reluctant, but honest. A third soldier, a woman named Corporal Nkosi, who had been in the adjacent lane on the day of the week 5 substitution, confirmed independently what the others had described. Stitt was interviewed 3 times. After the second interview, the program's documentation from the full 9 weeks was formally requested. That was when the pattern, which had been visible in Cavanaugh's records all along, became visible in the program's own. The week 5 substitution had no supporting documentation in the program files. The secondary review process applied to Cavanaugh's reports had not been applied to any other participant in the program's 7-year history. The equipment substitutions in weeks 1 and 2 were traceable to requisition forms that bore Stitt's initialing. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. Major Corrigan filed her assessment in early March. It was 22 pages. Tess read it twice, once quickly and once carefully, the way her mother had taught her to read anything that mattered. It confirmed, in the formal language of military administrative review, what her records had described. It recommended that her removal from the APT program be reversed. It recommended a formal review of program administration. It recommended, without using the word accountability, a series of consequential steps that amounted to the same thing. It also recommended that Cavanaugh be considered for reinstatement with full credit for the 9 weeks completed. She sat with that for a while. Not because she was surprised. She had believed in the outcome the way she believed in a well-calculated shot, not as a certainty, but as the most probable result of doing everything correctly. The uncertainty had always been in the variables she couldn't fully see, the humans who would read the documents, the institutional will to follow where the numbers led. In the end, the numbers had been enough. There's something that happens in systems designed around hierarchy and performance when a measurement can't be argued with. The system has, in its design, a kind of integrity, not always acted upon, often buried under preference and tradition, and the quiet comfort of things staying the way they are. But it's there. And when someone places a precise, documented, irrefutable record in front of that embedded integrity, sometimes the system does what it was designed to do. That's not a comfortable thing to say, because it implies the system works, and the system does not always work. And anyone who has been on the wrong side of it knows that. but it is the honest thing to say about what happened here. Tess Cavanaugh was reinstated on a Thursday morning in late March. The weather at Suffield was the particular gray of early Alberta spring. Not quite winter, not anything warmer yet, the kind of day that commits to nothing. She drove back through the front gate with the same bag she'd driven out with. She signed the paperwork. She was assigned a bunk. She was assigned a range slot for the following morning in a cohort that was now, by administrative determination, hers. She unpacked slowly, methodically, the way she did everything. Devereaux found her in the mess that evening. He sat down across from her with 2 coffees and put one in front of her without asking. "How does it feel?" he said. She thought about it genuinely, which she thought was the least she owed the question. "Like the calculation worked out," she said. He laughed, a short, real laugh, the kind that comes out when something is funny and also true. "You're going to terrify this cohort," he said. "I'm going to shoot with this cohort," she said. "That's all." He nodded. They drank their coffee. The mess was noisy around them in the way messes are, overlapping voices, the scrape of chairs, the particular institutional smell of food and floor cleaner, and too many people in a space designed for function rather than comfort. After a while, Devereaux said, "Beaumont asked about you. He wants to know if you're going to be all right. Tell him I'm all right. He'll want to hear it himself. Then he can ask me himself." Devereaux smiled at the table. "Yeah," he said. "That's what I thought you'd say." The following morning she was at the range by 6:45. The light was flat and even, the kind of light that experienced shooters either love or distrust. No shadows to read, no glare to compensate for, just the clean gray of an overcast sky settling equally over everything. A kilometer downrange, the targets were small and still. She ran through her checks the way she always did. Methodical, unhurried, in exactly the same order every time. Chamber, bolt, scope, bipod, wind data, temperature, pressure, the grass at the target line barely moving, bending maybe 2 degrees to the northeast. She noted it, she adjusted, she settled in. The range officer called the line ready. She took one breath, let it out halfway, and went still. The shot broke clean. She already knew where it had gone before the spotter called it. Not because she was certain, but because she had done the work, all of it, every step in the right order with the right attention. When the mathematics are right and the execution is right, the outcome follows. That's not arrogance, that's physics. "Center," the spotter said. "Dead center." She ejected the casing. She wrote down the result.